This is Father's Day, and sometimes men don't take to the heart all their blessings that a father does for them. I know sometimes I have blown Father's Day away, thought about it, but never really given deep concentration about the sacrifice of a dad for his kid and family. As alluded before, I'm going to encourage everyone to share a short little scenario about their dad. Right, Trey?
Yep.
And in that regards, it's a wonderful thing to kind of take to heart, Stephanie. All the good things that a dad can do for you. Right, Shelby? And on and on. And so, this is the message for today. Us sharing dynamics about our Heavenly Father and our earthly Father. Now, as I mentioned, my dad was a community man in that regards. He loved his community so much. He never bought a house, but always had a home. And he valued the family that he had so much that he sacrificed a home for my mom so that the kids could have a home. And let me give you one concrete illustration about how that went. And dads, you may hate this story. Children, you may love this story. It goes like this. I was the third in line in our family. Our oldest sister Linda, our older brother Larry, both 2 years separated from each other, and then me 2 years down the line. In that regard, my dad never bought a home, but lived above the family bakery that his grandpa started. And indeed it was a home for us, but we never really understood the great sacrifice for that home. My sister went to college first. She went to a Lutheran school in Nebraska, and then my brother went on a couple years later to school in Western Michigan, then I. And we all had to work for our tuition. In those days, when tuition was somewhat reasonable, came the fall time, and we had to come up with a check for $1,500, say, for the first semester, books and tuition, housing, $1,500. It's about what it costs for a course nowadays, doesn't it? Eastern Michigan graduate, before they raised the tuition 7%. How much is tuition going for now?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
A lot more than 1,500.
So, I would have to raise $750. Sometimes I worked 2 jobs during the summertime for a trucking company, and then Parks and Recreation in the city of Detroit, whatever, 60 hours a week or 80 hours a week or whatever. But I managed to get that $750 through one means or another. And my dad would write out a check for the other $750, and I'd be good to go for a semester and the like. I managed to get through college in 4 years, not easily done nowadays, but I did it and so forth. And when I graduated, and it was a secret that both my brother and sister had, I got half my college tuition paid for, back from Dad. Ed is my sister and my brother. A strong work ethic. You work for what you want to obtain. But if you work for it, there is a gift. And so it is like the kingdom of God. We work for it. but it is a gift. Other reflections about dads that people would like to share. Feel comfortable yet?
Sure.
Okay, just stand up and kind of share it with me.
My dad is a servant at heart, and he raised me in the Lutheran Church. 4 kids. I was the middle kid, middle of 3 boys, and then our sister was the oldest. And, what's funny? Have you ever heard the song "Cats in the Cradle"? It was playing on my way here, and my dad was busy because he was always involved in serving the church, serving the community, and we missed each other a lot, but he was always there. And anyway, he taught us all one very important thing, and that is to always trust the Lord. And I love my dad.
Anyone else in this row? Questions about dads?
Yeah, I'll say something about my dad. My father and my mom are in Florida now. They retired about 7 years ago, and they lived in Atlanta, Georgia prior to that. But anyway, growing up, my dad, I think he's an entertainer at heart, and he is a passionate photographer in his retirement, but started taking pictures well before I was born, and is just very talented, gifted artist, and as is a lot of his siblings as well. But one thing that my dad and I share growing up is he likes to make people laugh, and so we would spend lots of time watching comedy movies, and just we could have entire conversations just quoting lines from movies back and forth. It's just like this strange, special bond we have. He just loves to make people laugh, and that's just one thing, his gift of laughter to other people. He likes to entertain people with stories, and it's always something funny. Most of the time it is pretty funny. And I think he likes getting the laughter back too. But he just is one of those people that every time I see just makes me smile. It doesn't have to say anything, I'll just start laughing, I don't know. But I love him, and he's a special man.
College graduate or anything story about your dad? Or?
Sure. This is my dad, everyone. Let's see. Ever since I've been a kid, it was, as a kid grows up a little bit, and there's a time when I've been a punk and I'm going with her dad. But my dad always taught me a good work ethic, whether it was school or work or music or whatever I was doing in my life, to not settle and to work hard. That's made me the man I am today. So, love you, Dad.
Okay, this is also my dad. I guess like he's also my dad. We're also like buds, which is cool. Like we hang out and like go record shopping and listen to music and stuff. I'm gonna cry, but there's more. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Anyone in this row? Lois?
Yeah.
You want to stand up?
Oh, yeah, if I can. My dad, great, big, tall, strong man, but he was a very, very Christian man. And he would always say to me, well, you need to pray on that. Every night we had prayers. Dad would come in my room and we'd get down on our knees and pray. And it was, God bless Mommy, God bless Daddy, God bless my sister maybe, the typical prayers that we do. And he would say, if you want something, ask for it. Of course, I wanted a bike or a dog or whatever. But as I got older and problems became bigger, little children, little problems, big children, big problems. he always came to me, still does to this day, Lois, you need to pray on that. So that was my dad.
I come from a family that is very strong work ethic family. I always thought they were very strict growing up. Everything was on a sequence, on a schedule. We get everything done, we work before we play. But my dad, even though he was strict and he worked hard, and he taught us that even though he worked his whole day at work, he would take extra time, he gave us things. And the one thing that my dad mainly gave me was strength. Even though there's times in life where things get hard and you don't expect the things to happen. I grew up in a family with a mom and a dad, and we went to church every Sunday. Mom put the pot roast in, but Dad still took the time to make sure he was there with his kids. And the one thing he prepared me was to never stop. My life was not the family life that I had planned. I ended up being a divorced mother, a single mom. But the one thing my father taught me to be was to work hard and to do all the things. And now I'm in my master's program in college. I sometimes have to be mom and dad. But if it wasn't for my dad and the strength of my family, I would not be as strong and be here today. So I thank my dad for that.
Thank you. How about up front right here? Greg, got a story?
Yeah, sure I do. We didn't have a lot growing up, but what we did have was a lot of fun. And I learned the joys of life through my father and try to pass it on to my children. Because if you're not having fun and not loving life, and loving those around you, what's the point? And I cherish every day, and I'm fortunate enough to still have my father with me. And sometimes it seems like a pain because I've heard the stories a million times. But life is good, and yeah, that's about it.
All right, I guess one of my fond memories from my father, and I'm fortunate still to have him, and he gets to play with his grandkids often, is his love of fishing. So my dad taught me how to fish, and I still enjoy that, and now I get to pass that on to my kids and teach them how to do it. So that's one of the running themes that we enjoy together.
Thank you.
Few things I remember about my dad. He passed away when I was 16, so I remember saying when I turned 32 that year would be, I've lived half of my life with him and over half of my life without him when I turned 33. So I'm 34 and a half now, and I grew up in, I think I was one of the last generations that had a family business type background. My grandfather started it right out of World War II, and my father took it over. And from birth, basically, I was able to, let me rephrase that, I was forced to work at the family business from the age of when I could start walking, basically. And I would be there all the time. So work ethic was instilled in me right off the bat. My dad was the type of guy that was a perfectionist. He was, which now that I'm older, I know that doesn't exist. There's always a good thing to strive for progress. But perfection is something, he was a little bit overboard with stuff like that. Until he got to a certain point, things changed. But he was always, he was up at 5 a.m. and he wasn't home until 11 p.m. or midnight. He had two different jobs. He worked at the family business and he flew hot air balloons. So we were non-stop on the go. But I got to spend a lot of time with him because I was at the family business, and I was also forced as a young kid to go hot air ballooning and do all that stuff too. And when I was younger, I would, you're resentful almost. But then after he passed away, I really started to appreciate all of those things that we did, because a lot of the stuff people don't get to do. They don't have experiences like I had. Growing up in grade school too, even with his busy schedule, my brother and I were always on sports teams, and he was always the chaperone, always the one ringing the cowbell in the section, always the one irritating the other team's athletic director, the other team's players and parents, always the one getting in trouble. And same thing, you're a little embarrassed at the time, but the older I got, I'm like, he was pretty cool. He did all the stuff that all the other parents wanted to do, but they were too afraid to, you know what I mean? So, it was really, really cool. And I remember the first time I saw my dad cry too. I think I was 14 years old. And it really, for me, it was great because it taught me it was all right for men to have emotion and to really care about things. And that's when I first started seeing a change in him. We had a pretty rough situation going on. He changed, and that was right around when you guys hooked up. My father and Pastor Rebert hooked up. And there was a huge change in that from 14 to 16 when he passed away. He became very, very close with the Lord, changed his ways, and it was almost like, it was very strange, because it was like he was at a point in his life where he was ready to go, even though he was only 45. And that's why I believe he went when he went, because he was at peace. He had come back to the Lord properly, and everything was completed in his life. So he was a wonderful man. Taught me a lot. Took me another almost 17 years to start practicing the principles he taught me. But now I'm doing it, and everything's a lot better. So I really appreciate my father. And one other thing, I really appreciate the relationship I have with my mother, because my father hasn't been around. It really brought us a lot closer together, which is something I'm very thankful for too.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, I lost my dad when I was 25. Doesn't get any easier to talk about him, but he was amazing. He was my best friend. He taught me to love, and he taught me forgiveness. He had a really rough childhood growing up. Grandpa was an alcoholic, very abusive. But we always had a relationship with my grandpa, regardless, through that. And as my grandparents got older, my grandma passed away, my grandpa became very sick and in and out of assisted living. It never, my dad never let us, never lose that relationship with him. No matter what he went through growing up, it was still his dad. And that was something that my dad taught my brothers and I, was that regardless of what happens in life, I'm your dad, these are my parents, this is your family, you take care of them. And so as he got older and he got sick, every Sunday we still would go out and see him and stuff like that. And just that relationship, and my dad was amazing. He was loved by every single person, and he always would say, I have no friends, and he was always busy working, and we were in sports, so it was like his life revolved around my brothers and I. Travel hockey, travel soccer, everywhere. It was nonstop for him. And he always would, he would joke that, I don't have any friends and stuff like that. Well, and at his funeral, there were so many people that came. It was just overwhelming to see all these people who truly loved my dad. So he was awesome. I miss him.
Thank you.
So my father, who some of you have met, is a Baptist deacon, and we grew up in Connecticut. And on top of being a deacon, he was an educator, so he taught high school. at a couple of high schools in Hartford, Connecticut, and later on was a guidance counselor at the University of Connecticut. What was really interesting to me is we grew up in a fairly small town. We moved out to the country. We saw a lot of things happening in the city that he didn't like, so we moved out further away. But we'd always go back to Hartford to see his parishioners, the ones that were sick and shut in, deliver communion, things like that, and take me with him. And also we'd go there to get haircuts. You know, the better barbers were downtown in Hartford. And so we'd go walking down the street, and I was always amazed at just how many people he knew. And part of that was because he was a teacher and knew lots of kids, but you know, just because you're a teacher doesn't mean the kids will walk across the street to come see you. We walked down the street and we couldn't go 25 feet without people walking up to him. And I was amazed by that. He just has this kind of electric personality that draws people to him. And I was always amazed and impressed by that. And we've always gotten along very well. And, you know, I love him very much.
No, my dear old dad here. True, he's a good guy. You know, I have a very good relationship. A lot of my friends are jealous of what me and my dad have. 'Cause, you know, we watch sports together, you know, we hang out, we have a good time. But my dad's a bit of a tinkerer, as you could say. You know, he's very good at fixing things and making things. And I remember, I was probably about 11 years old, and I was obsessed with those American Girl dolls, you know, the type about this big. And I would get the catalog every month with all the cool little outfits and like things you could buy for them. And I remember in one of the catalogs, I saw that you could buy, oh, that's one right there. Yeah, there's one you could buy. Yeah, there was one you could buy this RV thing, and it was like this big. And you could, it was like a real like RV, it was like decked out, it had like a bed in it, and a little kitchen area, and I was loving that RV. I saw it and I thought, this has to be mine. But it was like $200. And so I was like, okay, do I blow like a big birthday gift on this, or do I just try and make it myself? So of course I just tried to make it myself, you know, why not? So I got some cardboard out and made a nice box structure, and you know, things were going along nicely. Until my dad saw it and he told me that it just wasn't gonna fly. And he went to the store and got all this cool stuff to like deck it out. He got wheels for it to make it actually move. And him and I would be down there in the basement just fixing it up, working away. And I just remember thinking, I have the coolest dad in the world, you know? He's down here making toys for me, like life is great. So that's my dad, you know, he does everything to please his kids. He's a really good dad.
And we still have the big RV.
It turned out nice.
It'll be a family heirloom. Oh, gosh. Like many of you, my father passed away when I was young. I was 20 when he passed away. And I remember him as a very warm man, very quiet-mannered. Commanded a lot of respect from people, and like Sarah, you were saying, at his funeral, they were bussing people in to come to pay respects to my father. And I knew I always looked up to him and respected him, and so it was just really nice to see that. But he was very well read. When I think of him reading the newspaper, reading books, but he also liked to go to the movies. Well, the funny thing is, we'd be at a dinner, and he would start talking about the movies he saw. And my mom would look at him and say, "When did you see that?" He's like, "Oh, I went last week." "When did you see that?" Well, he would go to the movies like in the middle of the day by himself. And as I got older, I started to do the same thing, and it happens now. Winfield and I are trying to pick a movie on demand, and I'm like, "Oh, I already saw that." "When did you see that?" "Oh, I went last week." So, like my dad, I go to the movies, I enjoy the movies, and sometimes my dad would bring my sister and me with him. And he had great taste in movies. Because of my dad, we saw Fame with my dad, if you remember that movie a long time ago. We saw E.T. with my dad, and I remember one day he put us in the car and he said, we're going to go to the movies. And my sister and I were really excited, had no idea, didn't even know the name of the movie. Movie started, we saw Star Wars with my dad.
My dad, as Stephanie just put, good guy, forever there. He has a great love of cars, and he passed that down to me. Not as high as the level of his love for cars, but I now know the appreciation for cars. He's in the RX-7 club, so in the car we have Dad's red RX-7, the silver RX-7 that doesn't have wheels on it, that he likes to call Mom's car, and then Mom's Spot, which we have to have in the garage. And he's been working on those cars for about as long as I can remember. This past summer, he went down to Grandma's and Grandpa's house to pick up the silver car and my car. So he drove all the way down there with his best friend, Rebert, and drove all the way back with my car, and I was just in love. I had a car to drive around. I knew how to drive stick because he taught me, so I was able to use it. And it started breaking down quite a few times. And the times that we had together, playing them together, I learned how much he loved cars, how to actually work and see what he's actually doing. Because before, it just looked like a huge puzzle to me. But now I can actually open up the hood and name a lot of things in there because of the times that we had together working on them. Maybe it wasn't my favorite being down under it while the oil's going on me trying to fix a part, but it was fun being with him, and I'm very glad that I was able to fix my car with him.
Beautiful, beautiful. Anyone else? I have a closing little point. Some of you may know that I'm a working priest now, and I deal with addiction people or people that have some issues with that. And I have a mentoring relationship with the people I work with and do my best for them. I only have two tools in my toolbox to help a person who has some issues. And one is motivation therapy. They call it motivational therapy, which is a big word for wherever you're at and where you want to go, take little steps to get there. You got to figure that out and encourage it. The other step is spirituality. And so I told the story the other day. I'm working with a lad, and he is 27, Rochester Prince, and just really, a whole litany of egocentric activities, including getting in trouble with the law. So one time I did a walking therapy, and we walked from here down to the corner and Great Lakes Harvest, and he has agreed to it, but worried about getting his white Nikes dirty, And then he was huffing and puffing and things like that. I mentioned that I was an Army chaplain way back when. The captain was impressed with that. And, well, maybe I could be in the Army. And I was hearing huffing and puffing in the wool, And so we got back, and he had a nice ball cap, an American flag on it, and instead of the stars, they had a big English D there and so forth. And he was worried about ruining his ball cap because there was sweat in it. And to me, sweat is a badge of honor. You're doing something constructive. I heard a whole bunch of work ethic stories from our parents here and things like that. And the bottom line is, I always try to stretch a person in a positive way from where they're at, either health-wise or with God. And it's so biblical. Jesus said two amazing things to get up to heaven, and that is to pick up our cross and follow Him, and secondly, go and make disciples. And as we interact with people, and I can't tell you how many love stories I've heard here. Our mission and our ministry, as Christ loved us unconditionally and extended to us grace, so also we are to love others unconditionally and show them grace. And that is exactly what our Heavenly Father did for us. That's the Father's Day message for today.